The warm scent of freshly baked bread filled the small kitchen as sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting the old counter golden. Sarah Lane wiped her hands on her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. For years, she had poured her soul into her baking, each loaf of bread a quiet reminder that even broken hearts could rise again. After her divorce, people had called her pathetic, whispering that she was done for. But Sarah didn't fight back. She simply baked. Every morning before dawn, she walked down Main Street, opened her little bakery, and let the smell of butter and sugar speak for her. Her shop wasn't fancy, just a weathered blue door, a chalkboard sign, and a bell that jingled every time someone entered. But people came. They came for her croissants, for her smile, for the peace that somehow lived between the shelves of pastries. What they didn't know was that every muffin, every loaf, carried a story, a piece of her rebuilding her life one recipe at a time. Her daughter Lily was the reason she never gave up. At night, when the world was silent and doubt crept in, Sarah would peek into Lily's room, watch her sleep, and whisper, "We're going to be okay." And somehow, the next morning, she always found the strength to start again. One morning, as Sarah kneaded dough, her phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from her ex-husband, Mark. He had a way of reappearing just when she felt steady. "Heard you're still playing Baker?" he'd written once, mocking her dream. She'd ignored him then, but this time, curiosity made her open it. "I saw your name in the paper," the message read. "Congrats on the article. Didn't know people wrote stories about failed marriages and cupcakes." She stared at the words, the ache familiar but duller now. She set the phone down and pressed her palms into the dough harder, whispering to herself, "Let him talk." Outside, the morning rush began. The first customer through the door was Mrs. Green, a retired teacher who swore Sarah's cinnamon rolls cured loneliness. "Morning, dear," she said, smiling as she leaned on her cane. "You look tired. Busy week?" Sarah smiled back. "Always, but a good kind of busy." She boxed up 2 rolls, wrapped them with care, and slid them across the counter. Mrs. Green tapped the lid and said softly, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You've got something special here." When she left, Sarah paused for a second, letting the words sink in. By noon, the bakery was alive with chatter, the hum of espresso machines and laughter mixing like music. Sarah's hands moved without thought, frosting cakes, refilling displays, wiping counters, greeting customers. But deep down, she was thinking about how far she had come. A year ago, she'd been living out of a suitcase, crying over bank statements, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life by leaving Mark. He had money, a house, security, all the things she thought defined success. But now she understood. Peace was worth more than comfort. She didn't need a mansion to feel rich. All she needed was this, her oven, her recipes, her freedom. Later that afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the shop. The driver stepped out first, tall, polished, out of place on her humble street. Then came a man in a gray suit with a warm smile and curious eyes. "You must be Sarah Lane," he said as he stepped inside, glancing around the cozy bakery. "I'm Daniel Brooks. I'm from Crestwood Investments." Her heart stuttered. "Investment? I think you've got the wrong place," she said, wiping her hands nervously. He chuckled. "No mistake. I've been looking for you. I tried your bread last week at a cafe downtown. Best I've ever had. I did some digging and turns out you supply half the bakeries in this area." She blinked, unsure what to say. "We're expanding our portfolio," he continued, "and we want to invest in local businesses that have something authentic, something people believe in." "You built this from scratch, right?" Sarah nodded slowly, the word scratch echoing in her chest. That's exactly what she'd done, started from nothing. No savings, no plan, just grit and recipes passed down from her grandmother. "We'd like to partner with you," Daniel said, placing a sleek folder on the counter. "Our firm could help you scale. More shops, maybe your own brand. What do you say?" She stared at the folder, her heart racing. "I'm just one person," she said softly. He smiled. "That's how every great story begins." That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table long after Lily had gone to bed. The folder lay open before her, charts, numbers, projections that looked unreal. She traced the logo at the top, Crestwood Investments. A real firm. Real money. Her bakery's valuation? $47 million. She laughed, half in disbelief, half in shock. Just 2 years ago, she'd been scraping change from her purse to buy flour. Now a bank was telling her she was worth more than she'd ever imagined. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. "So, rumor has it, the bank thinks you're some kind of success story now. Guess your little oven finally paid off." She smiled faintly, not with bitterness, but peace. "Yeah," she whispered. "It did." The next morning, she opened her bakery early, the smell of fresh bread stronger than ever. As the first rays of sun touched the window, Sarah wrote something on the chalkboard beneath her shop's name, "Baked from Heartbreak, Risen with Hope." She stood there, reading the words, feeling them settle deep in her chest, when the bell above the door jingled and a line began to form. She smiled, not because of the money, not because of revenge, but because she had finally proved something to herself. Sometimes the world calls you pathetic. Sometimes it leaves you to rot in the ashes of what you lost. But if you keep going quietly, stubbornly, one day you'll look up and realize you've built something they can't destroy. Sarah Lane had done just that. And as she handed a warm loaf of bread to the next customer, her hands no longer trembled. She wasn't the woman trying to survive anymore. She was the woman who had already won. Part 2. The spoon trembled slightly in my hand as I stirred my coffee, pretending to be calm. My husband, Mark, sat across from me, scrolling through his phone as usual. The morning light poured through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow on our little family breakfast. Our 7-year-old son, Ethan, munched quietly on his cereal, his legs swinging under the table. Everything seemed normal, almost peaceful, until he suddenly looked up, his big brown eyes darting between us. "Mom," he said in his innocent, clear voice, "should I tell Dad about last night?" The air froze. My heart skipped a beat, and I swear even the clock on the wall stopped ticking for a second. Mark's head snapped up, confusion flashing across his face. "What do you mean, buddy?" he asked, setting his phone down. Ethan blinked, clearly unaware of the bomb he had just dropped. "You know," he said softly, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Last night when that man came." My stomach twisted. Every muscle in my body went rigid. "What man, Ethan?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack. "You must have dreamed it, honey." But he shook his head, his expression serious in a way no 7-year-old should be. "No, Mom. I woke up to drink water, and I saw a man standing by your room. He was talking to you. Then he left." Mark's face turned pale. His eyes moved from Ethan to me, searching for an answer I didn't have. Or maybe one I didn't want to give. I could feel his suspicion, the silent question screaming behind his stare. "Is that true?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling with disbelief. My throat felt dry. "Mark," I said softly, "Ethan probably had a bad dream. You know how kids are." But even I could hear the crack in my own voice. The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan looked from me to his dad, confused by the sudden silence. Mark stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "I'm going to check the cameras," he muttered, walking toward the living room. I sat frozen, my hands trembling under the table. I wanted to say something, to stop him, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I already knew what he might find. Part 3. Mark's footsteps echoed down the hallway as he made his way to the living room, his silence heavier than any words could be. I sat there, staring at Ethan, who had gone back to poking at his cereal, blissfully unaware of the storm he had just unleashed. My hands were cold, clammy. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. A few moments later, I heard the faint click of the laptop as Mark pulled up the security footage. The kitchen felt too quiet. I tried to breathe, to think, but my thoughts were tangled. Had Ethan really seen something? Or someone? My mind replayed the night before, the soft knock on the door, the voice I thought was just my imagination. I closed my eyes for a second, but the sound of Mark's sharp intake of breath from the other room made my stomach drop. He came back into the kitchen, his face pale, jaw clenched. "Who was here last night?" he asked, his voice low and shaking. My heart nearly stopped. "What?" I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. "Don't play dumb, Sarah," he snapped. The camera caught someone at 1:37 a.m. a man, standing at our front door. "You opened it." I could feel Ethan's eyes on me, his little face puzzled. "Daddy, are you mad at Mommy?" he asked, his voice small. Mark didn't respond. His gaze stayed locked on me, eyes dark with anger and something else. "Fear. Who was he, Sarah?" he asked again, slower this time, as if daring me to lie. I don't know, I stammered, my voice barely audible. He must have been lost. I told him to leave, but Mark's face didn't change. He picked up his phone, scrolling quickly through something before turning it toward me. It was the footage. The man in the video was clearly visible, tall, wearing a dark jacket, and he leaned close when I opened the door, his hand brushing mine as I stepped aside. Ethan looked between us, sensing the tension. "Mommy," he whispered. "Is that the man I saw?" My breath caught. "Ethan, sweetheart, it's okay," I said quickly, trying to sound calm. "Go get your backpack. You'll be late for school." He hesitated, then slid off his chair and left the room. The second he was gone, Mark spoke again, softer now, but colder. "If you don't tell me who that was," he said, "I'll find out myself." I looked down at the table, my reflection trembling in the untouched coffee. The secret I had buried for years was clawing its way back to the surface, and this time there was no way to hide it.